Levington, who's chair of the Green Economy Committee at SAPFIA and former vice chair of that committee, as well as Mr. Kishan Pillay, who's director of research at the Department of Trade and Industry. Their bios are in your pack, so I won't go through in detail. But of course, refereeing this afternoon is Mr. Salani, MD at Royal HaskoningDHV, who will shortly just set the rules for us and get the debate going. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy it.
I've been requested. It's on. Yeah, I've been requested to use the mic. If I'm too loud, then you must tone down a little bit. My background, I remember one day as a power station manager, because like I operated a coal-fired power station, those who know South Africa, Creole Power Station, I was the power station manager. And I then listened to some young, bright chaps talking around the pebble bed modular reactor. And I was really worried as a power station manager to say, there goes my business. And there was this auditor that came to our office, and his name was Zvi also, I still remember him. And he said, Salani, why are you so worried? I said, I'm really worried about this pebble bed. What share of my market is it going to take? And it was around 1998. So Zvi came to me and said, Salani, let me whisper to you. This PBM will go nowhere. It was 1998. And he was right that 10 years after investment into the PBMR, they folded the project. So when we talk around to say what is the future in terms of the energy, one must remember in terms of as South Africans, it is really important that we must find an optimal mix in terms of primary energy. They said what is the input? And because any even in power generation, it's actually all about the energy conversion. So what medium you use and where you get the energy as your primary energy, as your output, is really important in terms of the mix. So if you go in history, there have been really challenges, because when you actually go back when it was still Ian McRae, even in the Eskom, Ian McRae looked at it and said that he had a slogan of saying power for all. And he started there actually saying that he was going out there to electrify anything that can be electrified. And that is actually what Ian McRae was all about, together with John Marie at the time. And Alan Morgan came in, and Alan Morgan actually had a different philosophy. And his philosophy was simple, to say that South Africa must be the lowest cost producer of electricity, so that they can actually attract other industries, so that they can actually employ. So over the years, we have actually moved from there. If you now think about 2008, in 2008, we suddenly saw the blackouts, and suddenly the cost of coal actually just increased by domestic coal by 50%. That suddenly it was actually from 105 per ton to 150 rands in 2008 per ton, and it never came back. So it kept on increasing and increasing. So the question we ask ourselves, because the philosophy has always been to say, for us to be the lowest cost producer of electricity, we want to ban low-grade coal, and banning low-grade coal and export the high-grade coal. So we don't know that that mix, when does it come to say that we must actually now adapt our plans to ensure that we ban optimal coal so that we can reduce on gas emissions. Because if you break, the challenge with low-grade coal was your boilers must be as big as possible. Even it shocked even Hitachi that when they came and designed, they suddenly found that the boiler furnace was as bigger than what they've ever seen before. And it was really huge, humongous. And the ash that was coming out of that boiler is actually going to be large because of the type of coal we actually use. So it had all these challenges. So having that in mind, we must start framing in our mind to say, how do we see South Africa way forward in terms of the energy mix? We had a lot of speakers earlier today. They shared with us trends in coal. They shared trends in us, for us, like in what will happen to petroleum, which we use in the car. But today, now, the guys who are here, before they even squash someone like who's actually like coming with coal, because like if you come with coal, I don't think you'll come alive. But that's a debate for you. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to give each and every speaker 10 minutes to give us a pitch. Just 10 minutes to give us a pitch, and thereafter we'll actually carry on with the debate. So I'll start with Ruby. Who's ready? Is that Ruby? Are you ready? Okay, Ruby, over to you.
Thank you very much. So we are not going through the presentation again.
You can go through it.
Yes.
10 minutes.
Yeah. Let me do it quickly. Thank you very much. My name is Ruby Ramatsui. I'm the group executive at South African Nuclear Energy Corporation. I'm just going to be quickly through the slides. Maybe in the background, I just want to mention to you about the existence of NECSA, who is a government-owned entity given life by the Nuclear Energy Act of Nuclear Energy Act. I've gone through this. And most of our mandate is, came out from the nuclear energy policy, which is established in 2008, and mainly is to promote the use of nuclear energy for electricity supply, and also to make sure that there's using nuclear energy to contribute to the country national program of social and economic transformation, and also for the improvement of life and the attainment of global leadership in self-sufficiency of the nuclear sector. Those are the decisions that have already been made by government in 2008. So what we have been seeing through that time is more of manifesting those kind of decisions. And what the policy is saying for NECSA is that it must participate in this kind of programs, mainly is to make sure that we secure enough uranium for all the power stations we need, for the nuclear power stations. We do have one, what is Quebec now, which is running. And we have this 9.8 gigawatts energy for nuclear power station, which is envisaged to be built. We also have to develop what we call nuclear fuel. And conversion is one of the processes of establishing the nuclear fuel. So we have to build that capability in South Africa. Also enrichment and also fuel fabrication. That is according to the nuclear energy policy of 2008. And just in a nutshell, NECSA has manufacturing capability already. We are an Eskom accredited. That means we are able to produce nuclear quality material already in South Africa. I think currently we are the only one in Africa to be able to do that. We are qualified. Decisions have been made already. We know about the IRP, even if you have questions, but currently, you know, the valid one is the one which we still use in the business case for nuclear. Until that has been updated or whatever, we still use the valid one. And it clearly indicates that there's a decision that nuclear will be about 9.6 gigawatt in our energy mix, and that's the plan. Nuclear energy, I think there's much of a debate, but when you look at the technology itself, you know, it gives you a stable supply of electricity. We have experience. I mean, if I can tell you about Quebec, it's been operating for over 30 years with no major incident so far. And it currently is the cheapest, if I can say, the producer of electricity on the Eskom network. So it's cheaper than all the coal and any other thing. So that's the characteristics of it. A reliable energy supply. the life cycle of it is about 60 years. I think the new design can go up to 80 years. That means when you have put the plant, it will be in your network for the next 8 years. And also it reduces carbon emission. It doesn't have. And as you mentioned with the PBMR and other things, it can be diversified in the way it supplies electricity. I'll go quickly through this. I don't know if I'm doing well with my time. I just want to come to this slide when we talk about the South African nuclear experience. You know, South Africa has been in the nuclear industry for over 50 years. Safari, which is located at NECSA Research Reactor, has been operating for 52 years already, and it's one of the best operated research reactors in the world, and mainly contributing to the production of what we call Molly-99 radiopharmaceutical, which is used for the treatment of cancer. And we have Quebec Power Station in Cape Town, which is run by Eskom, and it has been running for 32 years currently. So we do have experience, we do have an industry, and you know, we are not starting from a blank space as if we don't know what to do with nuclear. And yeah, those are the issues. But the main issue is that we need to beneficiate what we have. I mean, we have quite plenty of uranium also in Namibia. We have fluorspar, and we have zirconium in the country, which is part of the element which are necessary to participate in the nuclear space, and we do have them in the country. Currently, we are just exporting them, and we have to import them again. So there's an opportunity there to add value to the economy by beneficiating all these elements. Also, in terms of waste, South Africa has been managing waste in Falput, where we do our low-level waste and intermediary level waste. So we do have facilities to manage waste and have been operating for quite a long time, since we have power stations. So those are the operations which are current in South Africa, and they are well renowned for their safety. So they've been operating for almost 30 years safely. So we can deal with waste to a certain level. And as I've mentioned, we already have at NECSA a manufacturing capability to manufacture products which are necessary for nuclear build, for the nuclear. And our aim is that in the nuclear build, we'll be able to localize most of the effort. Obviously, we have to do a lot of catch-up, but we have the base, we are ESME accredited, and we are able to operate in those quality levels. So the aim is not just to buy all those things from overseas, but it's to be able to manufacture them locally as well. Yep, I think those are the... At NECSA, we also have a Nuclear Skills Learning Academy, which has been operated for the past almost 20 years, and we are training artisans who operate within the nuclear space. And that capability are already in the country, which we are already producing. Most of the artisans is engineers. We are doing drafting CNC machines operation, and also we are training safety, radiation, and security. I think what is interested about the nuclear program, I think that's what I need just to give background. In 1986, that's when the Quebec was initially commissioned. And in 1998, there was this white paper approved by the cabinet. In 2006, Eskom started procurement of a nuclear power plant, which was stopped. The bidding was stopped in 2008. And same in 2008, that's when the nuclear energy policy was approved. 2011, that's where we had the IRP. And the decision as well in the IRP was for the 9.6 gigawatts. And there was an establishment of what we call NEC squared. That means the government was taking a role in the decision on our energy policy going forward. And 2012, we have the NDP, and there was currently we are in the process of the phase decision in terms of the nuclear program, which is endorsed by cabinet. And there were certain developments already on the sideline. I don't know if many people are aware, where we sort of benchmark ourselves internationally with IEA and the story about the intergovernmental agreements, which you know that some of them are already had judgment from the courts. Yeah, and in the late 2006, there was an RFI which was issued, and since then there's been some kind of a stall in the program currently because the AOE is revisiting some of the issues which have been raised through the court case. Yeah. Well, I don't have to go through this. I think the latest status, in closing. One of the important decisions which have been made and is still valid is that according to the energy policy, Eskom has been assigned as an owner-operator of the nuclear power plants, and NECSA has been assigned as an owner-operator and procurer of the fuel cycle and multipurpose reactor. And the DOE will continue to act in the mandate of policy setting and coordination department. And as I've mentioned before, that Eskom and NECSA put out the joint RFI in December 2016. And when we have the green light, we'll be able to issue the RFP as well. I think I'll go that far. Thanks.
Thank you, Ruby. Well, in summary, is that like, well, we are seeing it growing to 9.6 gigawatt hours, as presented by Ruby. So I'd like to give at least Mike, because Mike is going to shoot from the hip. Or you have your presentation too? I have no presentation. I'm going to talk. You are going to talk, so you have 10 minutes on renewables.
Good afternoon. I was the Vice Chair of the South African Photovoltaic Industry Association for the last 4 years, and now Chair of the Green Economy Committee. Just a quick background on SAPVIA. It's an association that was started in 2010 by six PV developers, of which I was one of them, to represent industry interests to government at the time when they were starting the renewable energy program in South Africa. We now represent over 190 global and local players in the renewable energy, PV space. Obviously, quite a few of them are scratching their heads very carefully right now about what the future lies in South Africa. And we clearly lobby for the increased deployment of solar PV in South Africa. I was also a member of the South African Renewable Energy Council, which is more of an umbrella body for wind and solar, and I was also previously a councillor of the Ministerial Advisory Council for Energy and advised the previous Minister of Energy on a number of different issues. In terms of my 10 minutes, I think I was asked here initially to, I guess, put the hand up for renewable energy, which I'm always very happy to do. I think critically, the thing that's important in South Africa is there is no actually one silver bullet that solves this country's energy requirements. What we do have in South Africa is what I believe is a very competent energy planning tool known as the Integrated Resource Plan, certainly for electricity, Integrated Energy Plan for all of the energy technologies. And that is a very pure techno-economic tool that looks at a series of assumptions and certain barriers that we may place, and it comes up with a rational choice of energy technologies that we should be choosing for to supply our energy at the most sustainable and cost-effective means. As part of MACE, it was one of my duties, I guess let's probably put it this way, was to chair a working group to advise the previous minister on the IRP. And to be fair, I would say it was the first time I'd got to grapple with the IRP properly as an instrument. And I guess the key thing for us was very much at the time there was a preferred route, and I guess it's the last published version of the IRP, or draft IRP, base case, which actually had 20,000 megawatts of nuclear in it. In truth, it started off at 25 and actually was reduced. And when we were asked, it was myself, Anton Eberhardt, Tobias Bischoff-Niems, and Professor Johan van Wyk from Northwest University, to interrogate what had been proposed by the DOE and come up with our recommendations. And these were very simple recommendations. And we simply asked to give us the least cost unconstrained base case of the IRP, which essentially is the scenario that says remove all constraints, okay, and come up with what the least cost path for our energy future is. And remember this, the IRP 2016 update was something that was going to look at our energy requirements until 2050. I would say, unsurprisingly, probably, what we found was that least cost contained lots of renewable energy, lots of gas, small amount of coal, some hydro, and no nuclear. And understand the 9.6 gigawatts of nuclear comes from the 2010 IRP, which anticipated far higher growth rates for South Africa, I think probably over 5%. And part of the problems that we have of nuclear being in the plan is essentially the fact that our growth rate has dropped so low. And essentially our recommendation was that the base case of the IRP should be the least cost unconstrained base case. After that, there is absolutely no problem with having, let's call it what I would say, the policy adjusted version, where we may decide that we want to go to nuclear, or we may want to go to biomass, or whatever. However, the key thing at that point was to then say there should be an open debate about what the additional cost or what the implication is on the tariff path for that happening. Now, at the time, this was the end of 2016, using I think an LCOE of nuclear, I guess at 97 cents, which is what was used in the IRP then. I think it's gone up to 109. And using a tariff of 90 cents for PV and wind, and as we know in the expedited round, those prices were 62 cents. We came with an additional cost, okay, of some 86 billion rand a year, okay, for the, let's say, the preferred case. Now, ultimately, we can make a decision still as a country that 86 billion rand a year is actually a cost that we should pay to have a large nuclear fleet. But ultimately, that's a debate that needs to be had in the public space. Okay, and it has to be justified as a value-add proposition. I know personally, in a country that has South Africa's, let's call it, social spending priorities, I think there may be other things that I would spend 86 billion rand a year on than that. So let's kind of then just talk about solar PV. I mean, solar PV and wind really came into the mix in South Africa, really as a policy decision, really based around the commitments that South Africa made at the Copenhagen COP to reduce our CO2 emissions. At the time, in 2010, I think I would say solar PV was probably somewhere around, in international terms, about 3.5, 4 rand a kilowatt hour. I think wind was probably about 1.5 rand a kilowatt hour. And were technologies that wouldn't have made it into the IRP. In very blunt terms. And ultimately we had to have let's call it a policy support, okay, to introduce those technologies. It was, as I say, it was definite policy from government to have those introduced, okay. And the Renewable Energy IPP program was actually the instrument that we used to introduce that into the system. As we've seen over, I guess, 7 rounds that we've had, 4 rounds actually, but we've had some additional, let's call it sub-rounds. Okay, we've actually connected over 3,000 megawatts of renewable energy, wind and solar, CSP projects to the grid. Okay, we've had inward investment of some 201 billion rand, of which I would say 24% has come from foreign investors, so the bulk of that has still come from locally. In terms of, and I've always found this a very strange measure, but it's the one that government used in terms of job years. We've created 31,000 job years, okay, through that program. As we all know today, we are unclear exactly where the procurement program is right now, okay? And however, what we have now in terms of the price drops Wind has dropped, the wind prices have dropped from around 1, somewhere in the region, I think about 67%. I think PV prices probably 78%. And we now have a situation where, certainly, and I'll talk about solar PV, because that's really, I guess, my core interest, where solar PV tariffs now are certainly cheaper than Medupi or Kusile, certainly cheaper than Eskom's wholesale price, way cheaper than many, I would say, many municipal prices. And I would say within 4 to 5 years will probably be cheaper than Eskom's existing coal fleet. In fact, the majority shareholder in my company holds the world record low price in Chile, which is the equivalent of about 38 South African cents a kilowatt hour on PV. And that's ultimately where we're going to head on pricing going forward. So, I guess how do we react to, how do we react as an industry to this? Well, it's very simple. Okay, if we want to create, we have an industrialized economy. As we have all seen over the last 2-3 years, the Eskom sales have consistently dropped. And they've dropped, okay, very simply, because price elasticity tells you that the higher tariffs go, okay, the less we will consume, either through energy efficiency. In many cases, as I say, the industrial base of this country has often been based on the beneficiation of typically commodities that have high levels of electricity input. So you look at aluminium, you look at ferrochrome, you look at PGMs. Now, ultimately, if we cannot offer, okay, globally competitive industrial tariffs, okay, to companies in South Africa, they will not build smelters here. Okay, so as much as we love to talk about beneficiation, okay, it will not happen, okay, if we have Eskom tariffs at 95 cents a kilowatt hour, and I'm being very generous to Eskom that that's actually what the price is going to be. And ultimately, that's going to stop investment decisions. So what are we increasingly starting to see? We're starting to see industrial customers wanting to directly contract with IPPs. We already know City of Cape Town has taken the Minister of Energy to court with regards to the Section 34 determination that she wants, so that Cape Town can enter directly into PPAs with IPPs. City of Joburg wants to do the same. Okay, you're starting to see large-scale rooftop PV programs go up. We estimate right now, and it's a very difficult thing to estimate because the one thing about rooftop PV, particularly if it's for own use, that you actually don't need to go to anybody to ask for permission. Okay, but we estimate from, I would say right now, if I speak to the main panel producers in this country, they're providing about 20 to 25 megawatts a month of PV panels going into the rooftop market. And so we estimate there is actually an industry already, some 400 megawatts of rooftop PV that's already up there. So what will happen? Okay, if we cannot get Eskom right, if we cannot get our electricity prices right, okay, solar PV and wind will eat their lunch. Okay, and I think the future, I think, is one that sees a very great change of our electricity future from dominated by coal. Again, as one of the things of the IRP that never gets talked about, is that no matter which direction we're going, whether it's a nuclear future, whether it's a high renewables future, we are closing down 27.5 gigawatts of coal-fired power between now and 2040. And right now, we have no plan about how we're going to do that in a responsible fashion. But that energy transition is a transition that's happening all across the world. This is not a unique South African phenomenon. Okay? And ultimately, my view is whether we do it by design, okay, and you would generally prefer to do an energy transition by design. If we don't do it by design, it will happen by default. Okay? And therefore, I'm not sure if I'm sounding cataclysmic or if I'm actually talking my industry up here, but if we grasp that future, it has huge opportunity for us. If it doesn't, it still has opportunity for us, but not as optimal as it could be. And I think maybe I've said enough because I think I've gone past my 10 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mike. really made a good case for renewables, and also in terms of the mix, and also in line with IRP, 2016, as we have shared with ourselves. And what I like mostly is actually where I started, to say price will be determined. If we cannot afford it, then industry won't be able to come in, okay? So I want to actually give us a case on coal. Where is it going?
Can I have my presentation? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Nzama Baloyi, and compared to my panelist, I'm just a coal miner. And I love mining coal, that's why I'm here to defend it. So, I'm gonna try and say to you guys, regardless of what they are saying, coal is here to stay. And I'll be showing you guys pictures that coal is here to stay. And I'm going to say that we are here in this beautiful building, and we owe this beautiful building and the lighting that we have to coal. Simple as that. You can say what you want. That's a reality in South Africa. Not only in South Africa, though, but in the world at large. Are we ready to ditch it into the history books? Definitely not. The picture is saying that we still needed some more. Every clever guy that says it will be replaced keeps saying that, but we need it as a base. So I'll be showing that. Do we have challenges to address as coal? Definitely. I will show you pictures over time in terms of what coal does. But there are a lot of research, there are a lot of investments that is going in terms of making sure that coal can be clean. So where do we stand as SADC? Not necessarily South Africa, but SADC as a region. What is the low road? What is the high road for us? I'll try and share my views and closing remarks. I don't need to say much, guys. You can see for yourself. Yeah, there will be a little bit of a dip, but up to 2100, coal remains a good base for our energy mix. Yeah, nuclear is coming in as a replacement, but clearly you can see that clever people are saying coal is here to stay, not me. I'm just using their information. Today, as we see it, we owe it to coal. Everybody remembers Titanic, right? The biggest ship ever built, it was running on coal, just in case you didn't know. Every time you go to OR Tambo and climb into a flight, just say thank you to Sasol. Because we are turning coal into petroleum products that can take you from South Africa to anywhere in the world. If we look at China, I'll spend a bit of time about China. They are consuming about 4 billion tons today. In the last 10 years or so, they were building up to 10 power stations every single year. If you compare the coal price today and the oil price today, I don't have to say any further. The demand for coal is there because every clever person out there understands that coal still has a role to play and it's cheaper than whatever other people say. South Africa's electricity is still based at 90% of it. It's based on coal. As I said, petroleum, 30% from Sasol, majority of it comes from coal. We mine about 48 million tons in Secunda, which we turn into gas, into a whole lot of chemicals that you use. Did any one of you use Vaseline today? If you didn't use it, please raise your hand. Because if you did, that was Sasol. It comes from coal. If you are going to stop using Vaseline, let's talk about it. Yes, Europe and America are moving into the different energy mix. But we know that America is sitting on a large quantity of coal. Guess what? We know Trump is trying to make America great again. Substitute America great again to coal great again. That's what he's saying. Do we have challenges? Okay, if you look at China in 1970, you can look at the far right there. That's how China looked like. 10 years later, you can see there's development. And that development, that movement of people from rural areas into the urban areas comes from coal. You need to make sure that you electrify them. In 2000, you can see how big the buildings are. That's the 4 billion that I was talking about, guys. And that's coal. And in 2016, you can mistaken Beijing to be somewhere in Europe. And the genesis of that is coal. We can say the same thing with Europe. Those development, industrialization came from coal, guys. I'm saying we're not ready to ditch it, as you can see, but we accept that we need to do our homework. We need to make sure that we find solutions that will make coal sexier, cleaner, and it's up to us to apply our mind, to apply our brain, and make sure that it's cleaner. There are people that are really working very, very hard on that, and the price of coal will tell. Obviously, if it becomes too expensive, there will be mines that will be closed. So he's right that over time, we always project that if we don't do something, we'll close coal mines. I don't want to stand here and be a politician. That's not my space. But if we don't invest in coal and we're dependent on day-to-day, coal will become expensive, simple as that. You need to put capital and make sure that you've got long-term thinking to make sure you can control the cost. If you don't do that, cost will just keep running. So we need to be smarter as a country. When we're sitting at a lot of coal, there's still water bag full of coal for South Africa. Do we just leave it there and move to something else that we don't know? Or do we find solutions? As I said, we are not ready to ditch it. Every graph that you look at tells you that coal is here to stay. So I'm not going to argue with them. They can say what they say. It's not me saying that. It's clever people saying that. They're saying that coal has a future, and we'll, need to make sure that, we support that. I'm a coal miner. I'm just looking at more coal reserves, getting ready to mine it because there will be demand. As we know today in the export business, in the export market, it's sitting between $90 and $100, while oil is sitting at 55. Clearly, something tells you that there's demand for it, people want to use it. From what I could see, nuclear, it's good, but Jesus, I don't want to be in Japan when what happened in Japan happens in South Africa. Who wants to be here when it happens? Please raise your hand. So there is issue. Yeah, he's right. We have worked some years safely. The Japanese have been ahead of us for donkey years, but it still happened. And they are going to sit with those legacy issues. Kids that will be born that are deformed, all sorts of things. I don't want to be part of that, guys. Hydro. We know that the next war will be fought over water. So if you are going to use water to generate electricity, guess what? Be ready for the community coming in arms to shut you down because you're misusing the water. Solar energy. We heard the numbers are very, very expensive. Over time, it might come cheaper. But right now, there's an acceptance that it's not the cheapest form of energy. Oil, it does get expensive over time, but currently it looks like it's coming down. So there might be a case. Gas, very expensive to find a pothole of gas. I'm not in the gas environment, but to drill everywhere hoping that you'll hit a pothole. And every hole that you put down, it's very, very expensive. So I don't know if we'll really get it cheap enough to replace coal. Coal, we have got meters and meters of it. It's relatively cheap to mine. So coal is here to stay. I'm saying that between 30 and 50 years in our environment, South Africa. But the clever people are saying it will go beyond that. Do we have challenges? Definitely yes. You can see in Beijing, at certain time, it really get bad. Eh? Oh, okay. I believe I only get a few minutes. The other guys get more. I've been timing myself, so please, slack. Slack. Coal to liquid, yes, but we're investing a lot of money as Sasol to really deal with the CO2 challenge. And if anyone says that shut down Sasol today because we've got a challenge, you're welcome. I mean, it means that we shut down OR and you cannot move anywhere. We do that, eh? But we need to find solutions. There is challenges. We need to find solutions. We need to work together. We need to invest money in finding solutions, and we're doing that. I'm not going to go through that. If you have time, you can quickly go through that. Yes, we need to find solutions to that. These are the percentages in terms of the demands. It's mainly coming from, outside South Africa. And I'm saying that even in the SADC region, we have got a lot of coal in Botswana, we've got a lot of coal in Limpopo, we have got a lot of coal in the SADC region. And yet again, we have got challenges with electricity. We are exporting electricity to the SADC region. Let's make sure we carry on with that. Yes, the other stuff needs to come in as it gets cheaper, but let's focus on what we know. We have been doing this for donkey years, and we haven't really made a major safety incident over time. So I'm saying that for SADC region, coal should be the backbone, and we mustn't let other people to tell us that coal all of a sudden is too dirty for them. For billions and billions of years have grown and become the way they are today because they were using coal, and all of a sudden it's not good enough for us that are coming up to develop ourselves. Closing remarks quickly. We need to continue with coal. It will play a large role into our energy mix, in particular electricity. We need to make sure that we invest in efficiencies. We invest in better yields in terms of making sure that the coal that we export, we don't export second-grade coal. We need to find CO solutions. We need to find also a business case for it. We can use it for other developments or other energies. And the world is saying that coal is here to stay, and let's carry on with it. It's short and sweet. Thank you.
Thanks for making the case for coal. I think I must now jump to oil and gas. Kishan, over to you.
Thank you. I'm going to keep it brief because going last, there's a lot of things you can pick up. But so I'm the Director of Oil and Gas at the Department of Trade and Industry. It's interesting that a colleague from Sasol says that he doesn't work with his gas team because his gas team believes that gas should be the backbone of the SADC region. In fact, Sasol is the #1 importer of gas into the South African economy. And they're doing a good job with the gas in terms of creating petrochemicals from it. But let's start at sort of the basics for gas. I think it's obvious it's 50% less emissions if you use gas as a fuel source. Gas is the type of energy that is less threatening to my colleagues on the panel because it can be used with either fuel source. Like Mike correctly said, there's no one silver bullet. It has to be a mix of energy, and gas plays a fundamental role in any scenario you have, whether it's coal, whether it's nuclear. Gas is there, renewables. I think gas, for me, is the stepping stone towards more cleaner energy, towards more renewables into the system. I do believe that gas-fired power stations are easier and quicker to build. Gas-fired power stations are more flexible. They're able to run be start up quicker, be shut down quicker. So you're able to give the balancing on the grid that makes it a bit more efficient. And yes, like I said, it works well with renewables. It complements it. We've set in on huge potential resources off our coast, onshore, for our own domestic gas resources. Many of the multinationals have already farmed into South Africa's waters. We've got huge finds up in the Mozambican Ruvuma Basin, Tanzania, Uganda. SADC, or the region, is slowly transforming from a mining one into a petroleum one. I think from the DTI's perspective, though, leaving aside the electricity angle of gas, what we find more appealing is the actual industrialization impact of gas could have. You look at what's happened in the US economy off the back of the shale gas revolution, notwithstanding the fact that they've got a gas infrastructure that's been built over decades. Gas prices at Henry Hub now are below $3 per MMBTU. You've seen a revitalization in the manufacturing sector, steel notably. You've seen a lot of growth in food production, plastics, rubber. You've seen a lot of reshoring of some of the industries, relocating production facilities in the US. You've seen Sasol's Lake Charles expansion and investment into Lake Charles with the ethane cracker that's been built there off the back of gas. Sasol, interestingly, has also, through the Romcom pipeline, put a new loop line to get more gas into South Africa. So from an industrialization point of view, I think gas plays a lot of roles. Look at Qatar. I think Qatar, prior to the first LNG trains coming on stream in 2001, had a GDP per capita of 28,000. At 2014, it's sitting at 98,000 just as a result of gas. So the industrial capabilities of gas in an economy, I think, is huge. Gas has the ability to play a fuel source. It can replace diesel, FHO, paraffin. It's much cleaner. It's easier to transport, as and when you build markets going on. There's various new technologies now. LNG from Mozambique is a viable option, provided you have LNG landing facilities. Micro LNG allows you to build virtual pipelines, build up demand points. Gas as a molecule has various applications in petrochem, GTL, can make plastics, petrochem, rubber, can revitalize the steel. And I think what's really important is as you start building the gas market, you start unlocking and de-risking demand for when eventually, if something is found offshore or onshore, you then have a market to get it to. I think this offers a great opportunity for South African industry to start getting involved. The mining industry is an extractive industry. We see a lot of similarities between shale gas and mining in terms of how you actually extract it. In fact, it's something that the department looks in is how do we transition some of our mining capabilities to a new extractive industry? How do we get South African industry involved in actually developing our own gas fields, both off and onshore, albeit it's a very technologically challenging environment. Just an antidote, I think Shell with the Chamber of Mines has drilled a few holes into the Karoo, just research holes, drilling for core samples into the shale, and it was done completely with South African mining equipment. Absorption tests were South African, and there was no issues, apart from the fact they didn't have a blowout preventer, which was bizarre. Yeah, I don't think I have much, but I do think that gas has a role to play in any energy mix, so I'm actually not competing, but I just think the industrial benefits of gas is just a lot higher, and it gives South African industry a chance to play both in the upstream and develop backward linkages from the gas, and in the downstream in terms of developing new products for the economy. And being the anchor for SADC, alongside coal, I'm not really sure, but we can see.
Thanks very much, Kishan. This is a debate, so I will open up for anyone.
Hi, my name is Marika Rodmer. I'm a student at Wits University. I'm currently looking at the coal industry, and I think one thing that is never mentioned in these debates on what energy should be used is that the coal industry, you need the domestic offtake in order to have your export industry. You can't mine, export coal unless you mine domestic coal and you use your domestic coal. So basically, if you close down your domestic coal industry, you close down your export industry. And I think anyone in the coal industry would be, you can go onto any website and see just what a contribution the coal export does make to South Africa's GDP. So I think that should not be ignored.
That's a really good point. Any floor speak?
Thank you, Eunice, again from Anglo-Cone. I just want to ask the very last speaker about the gas and say how much reserves do we have in South Africa? What are we looking at? Are we looking at importing? And just want to understand.
So there's really no definite answer, because until somebody drills onshore and finds something and proves up reserves, so that's why the band is somewhere between 30 to like 300 and somewhat TCF of onshore shale gas. I'm not quite sure of what's the offshore potential yet. But I do know in the region, you're looking at something, if you take everybody into account, something close to 600 and 800 TCF. And that's almost equivalent to what Qatar had initially, about 990 TCF. Bear in mind, this is still potential. Until somebody actually drills and finds something that is commercially viable, the numbers will come down. But it is potential. But again, somebody has to find it, and that's the challenge.
As I said, it's a matter of finding a pothole. If you can find that pothole, gas is a good resource. You are right, we are using it at Sasol. So coal and gas will, in my book, go hand in hand. But it's expensive to find that pothole, and that's my argument.
Hi, my name is Harun Danabai. Just from, I've been following the DOE IPP office cost of renewable energy. In 2015, 2016, the numbers that we got from them is that solar and wind came out cheaper than the normal baseload energy, but we need the baseload energy, it's nuclear, gas, and coal, because renewables doesn't provide the baseload. Right? Just I have a question for Ruby, in that in 2011, government decided, worked on that we need 9.6 gigawatts by 2030 based on a booming economy then. Recently, from what I get from the media, is very conflicting reports, especially with Eskom having excess electricity at the moment. Is the 9.6 still relevant now? There's tenders out, and there's Russians, Japanese, all of them tendering at the moment. How far is the tender process, and when do you expect the tender to be awarded for nuclear? The other one is on solar PV for Mike, is that we've got most of the solar PVs been assembled in South Africa. There's no manufacture of solar PV in South Africa. Is your body promoting the manufacture of solar PV panels in South Africa? One, and the other one is that solar PV costs is now the cheapest of everything else at the moment, and that's great. Where do you see this price falling to in future? Eskom's got excess electricity till 2021. By 2021, solar PV may be a hell of a lot cheaper, right? And you want to fund that, coupled with base load. And it would be foolish just to put all your eggs in one basket. But by 2021, where do you see solar PV? What are the forecasts for solar PV by then? That's when Eskom will need excess electricity, and coal-fired power stations start getting mothballed. Thanks.
So there are questions for Kishan and also questions for Mike and Ruby.
Thanks very much. Yeah. As Mike alluded in his presentation, that the initial figure was, proposed figure was around 20 gigawatt. 9.6 gigawatt was more chosen for localization benefit. So that was the minimum we can have to optimize localization. That's where the 9.6 gigawatt is coming from. So you still need 9.6 to really benefit localization, because I believe nuclear, if you are not focusing on localization, you're going to lose like the huge benefit, which can impact the economy quite greatly. So my belief is that 9.6 will still stay as a minimum. And the tender process and the IGA, is that the process which have been taken? But I mean, if you understand the nitty-gritties, I mean, the IGA are not necessary to procure, to be honest. I'm not sure why it's the issue of the debate. It's just an agreement between governments how they need, but it's not a procurement document that is necessary, to get the RFP or RFI. We just need an enabled environment that the government will cooperate. So, but what DOE is doing currently is that they are revisiting the process which have been taken But if you remember, the main issue is the Section 34 determination but also it affects all technologies because the same process nuclear has followed is what has been followed by renewables. So, the judgment affects how DOE does Section 34 determination. So it's not about the nuclear itself, but obviously issues have been raised and the minister decided to take another route of revisiting and redoing it again. But that hasn't stopped nuclear. Everything is ready, to be honest. I mean, the RFP, it's almost ready. As soon as there's a green light, you just have to wrap them up and issue them. Thanks.
Mike?
Harun?
Okay.
Just maybe a little aside. The 9.6 gigawatts determination was set aside by the Western High Court, okay, which ultimately has taken the nuclear process back to the start. As you rightly said, it's also affected all of the other determinations. It's a long debate, and however, until the IRP 2016 is done, essentially all of those things are on hold. Okay, but to go back to the question around solar PV, the reality of it is the bulk of PV cell and panel production is based in China. And ultimately, there is a huge support system by the Chinese government, okay, to assist Chinese panel manufacturers in terms of being competitive. So I can give you a very clear example. If I buy a leading tier one panel that's South African produced, it is going to cost me 3 cents a watt more than buying that panel, same manufacturer from China. Okay, and that is because the Chinese government gives a series of tax breaks and incentives for local manufacturers. So one of the key issues around solar industrialization is to work out, should South Africa be building panels? Do we think we can do it better than the Chinese? One. Second, do we rather take the fact that solar PV, as you correctly said, is some of the cheapest generation being produced, new generation being produced right now, and do we rather look and see how using cheap electricity in our system unlocks certain industrial process, as we've talked already about the fact that many smelters will not open with Eskom prices at 95 cents and higher. We have a special tariff application or deviation from Eskom tariff application in at NERSA right now for a silicon carbide smelter in South Africa, because the equivalent smelter in the Netherlands, okay, actually operates around buying or procuring power from the European Power Exchange, where sometimes when you have overproduction of wind, electricity prices go to zero. So ultimately, they will never open that smelter in South Africa until our prices, industrial prices, drop. So ultimately, that's the space we are in. You ask where the solar prices are going? We're only at the start of the S-curve on solar PV. Okay, so I would say, as I said, we would look to see solar PV prices drop into the low 40s. Already, as I said, in Chile, we've produced that we're producing at 2.91 US cents a kilowatt hour. So if you want to bring that back, it's about 38 cents a kilowatt hour in South African terms. Okay, and we have far better solar irradiation. Well, actually, I lie. We have the second best solar irradiation resource in South Africa behind Chile. Okay, but we're not using it.
So thanks. We all heard that like Eskom actually gave us a gloomy picture and said their focus for this year is that like, well, there will be a drop of 13.6% compared to last year in terms of their sales. And they actually blamed renewables in terms of actually taking their space and also increasing their cost, that they're actually looking for about 60 billion extra to actually compensate for that. And they are putting a case to NECSA So listening to the debate today, you are the judge. Because like there's no silver bullet, as all the speakers have said. We need an appropriate mix, but we also need to ensure that the industrialization agenda actually kicks off. Because without affordable electricity or lower cost of electricity as compared to other countries, we would battle to get industries in South Africa. And that was a strong message that came out of the speakers. So thanks very much to everyone, and you'll be the judge.